What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here for Clickheads. In today's video, we're going to be going over a tier list, taking a look at the patch 0.5 and think if that's going to change the meta at all. And, well, kicking it off with our first agent, still being Sage, I think says a lot. The new patch made her wall more expensive and her slow orbs not last as long or be as potent, but to me, it's the fact that she can spam two of them along with the wall to entirely deny either a lane or really make retaking impossible that made that kit so good. They could knock slow orb down to 1 capacity total for the round, or perhaps you get 2 kills to reset it and it would still be very good. But to me, secretly the thing that's keeping Sage on top of everything is her ability to heal herself and her team and the amount of extra health that's going to give you over the course of many rounds in the game. The only character similar is Phoenix, and he doesn't heal nearly as much, whereas Sage can tank some shots herself, and it isn't uncommon to get 1 to, I would say, possibly 3 heals on a teammate in the middle of a round. 30 seconds, I think, might be a bit too forgiving, or the amount that she heals as well, because, well, it basically means that chip damage is kind of irrelevant when you have a Sage on your team playing defensive. I think her lane control can be emulated by other agents, but it's the heal that makes both herself tanky and the rest of her team as well that keeps her a must pick in the top slot for me. Moving on to our next agent, it is going to be Brimstone. I have him ranked so highly because of how reliable he does so much for the team. The duelists and info gatherers are really popular, but Brimstone covers all your bases for both attack and defense. The smokes can either be used in order to drain out time on the clock, or to full execute a site on attack so that your aggressive teammates have an easier time going in. None of the smokes are close even after buffs to Omen. We'll talk about him later. They're the biggest, longest lasting, and hardest to push through smokes in the entire game. Those keep him at the top spot. His ultimate is a nice cherry on top as well. Everything about Brim is really reliable value. Next up on the tier list is going to be Breach, who's possibly the most underutilized agent right now in Valorant. As more players unlock him and learn how to play him, I think we're going to maybe eventually say that he's OP. Now, the truth is, you don't get as much value as just pivoting around your team and healing like Sage, but when you're active or learn map spots or have any bit of coordination whatsoever, Breach is the best agent in the game. The thing stopping me from putting him all the way at the top is because you do have to execute his plays, and there's going to be some timing, map knowledge, and teamwork required to get them to work. But once you do, he performs like no other agent can. And I think, anyway, he's the most reliable way to set up free kills. Next up on the list is Cypher, and he's an interesting agent to discuss because I feel like there's 2 meta forces pushing and pulling him in 2 different directions. So on one end, Riot is really cracking down on the nerdy camera spots that, let's face it, kind of abuse a mechanic that probably shouldn't be in the game. I think when those are all gone and all of the cameras you can use are fairly obvious, Cypher's still good, but he's not going to be as broken as he was before when you can put a camera up in the skybox and see the entire map. But on the other end of things, Cypher pairs amazingly with Sage because the 2 of them deploy such a wealth of defenses that between the traps and walls, you have a seriously fortified position. Now, if we see significant Sage nerfs, or if agent bans were to come in, for example, I think we might see Cypher's more slow, deliberate play get outplayed by more aggressive tactics. But for now, he hangs in the S tier for me, although I can see a world in a patch or 2, or with a rule set change, where Cypher drops out in favor of more direct agents. Keep in mind that they nerfed Cyber Cage, which was his best tool in a battle, so they're really relegating him to be that full-on defensive playstyle. And as the meta goes with that, so goes Cypher, in my opinion. Moving on to the A tier, and well, honestly, A and B, I could see a lot of argument to go up or down on any of these. I think they're rather interchangeable, but at the top of it, I do pretty confidently put Phoenix. Reason being, I think when you learn his best spots for curveball, even after they nerfed its cost, making it more expensive, I think you can get extremely reliable value out of it. And as players have really learned Phoenix, I've gotten higher on him from seeing what you're supposed to do with him. He is a little tricky, but there is a benefit of curveball over Breach, where Phoenix's flash comes out faster. It's a little less flexible control of where you can deploy it, but there's less obvious setup, making it harder to dodge. And well, the rest of Phoenix's kit is just solid. His wall actually can control space and heal him. Molly heals him as well. And between that and Run It Back being one of the better ultimates in the game, Phoenix is a very brawly agent, and you need somebody that's going to go in, right? Not everybody can just fully play defensive. I think his stock raises in solo queue, which is something to keep in mind as well. And ultimately, it's his flexibility to have a lot of different options on the entry, whereas I think the other agents that want to do this job are a little bit more obvious or limited in the variations that they can do on a round. And with so many rounds in Valorant, I think you need that to not feel like you're pigeonholed into one spot on the map, for example. But moving on to the next agent, I have Sova. Sova has seen a boost in my confidence in him due to how many lineup spots have been found on the various maps in the game so far. There's fairly easy ones to toss a recon bolt into the middle of Hookah through that skybox, or right on the top of A site on Bind as well. We'll have to make some videos breaking these down, but I think once you learn them, you can gain information in a way that no other agent can, in that Cypher needs to be really close to put a camera on the corner, for example, whereas Sova, you can learn a spot across the map, which is very powerful. The rest of his kit is a bit mediocre, but Owl Drone is better than nothing when you're trying to pair with an entry player. It going ahead to scout lets you take space. Shock Dart is very weak, but it gets better the more clever you get with it. And his ultimate isn't one of the best, but either following up on his own marks, or if you have a Cypher on your team, one of his traps or cameras can get a reliable kill or two, or at the very least deny a defuse on the bomb. Now moving on to the B tier agents, Omen recently got a buff. His smokes last a little longer, although there is a longer recharge rate on his next smokes, but overall the uptime of his smokes are higher, which is just good. The relationship between the controllers kind of flows like this, where I think Brimstone's just the best. Omen is better at trying to go aggressive with his smokes, and Viper's better at trying to be defensive with them, but I rank Omen higher because of the flexibility of how he can play. Being able to get multiple smokes in a round lets him sometimes emulate the playstyle of Brimstone, but also sort of lets him allow to go aggressive in those spots. It's still pretty gimmicky though, but when mastered, he has a lot of trickery he can get away with. And though his flash is hard to use, it is devastating when you get it to work. Overall, I think a lot of his plays are fairly reproducible throughout an entire game, and the peak of his very gimmicky plays can outright carry. So I think he's just solid middle of the pack. Next up is Raze, who is definitely the most controversial agent. She isn't considered as dominant in the organized play, like in tournaments with full pre-mades, but in ranked, I think she's pretty amazing. Almost as good as Phoenix. You see, Phoenix is much more reliable in the types of plays he does, but when you master Raze, she can deny spots on maps and play positions unlike any other agent. And there's actually some cool interactions between her and the defensive agents, Sage and Cypher, where a paint shell into a room littered with Cypher traps can clear them out. Even if you're not getting that kill, exchanging that utility opens up the map a bit. Her satchel charge can be used to burst down Sage's wall, which is especially useful in pistol round, not to mention she also can jump over it. So honestly, I think Raze is a bit underrated. Yes, they only gave her one paint shell, but it's not too hard for her to pick up kills with her paint shell and satchels, and especially when she gets her ultimate. So a lot of times you do get that second paint shell use. If Sage ever gets nerfed and her healing goes down, I think the amount of chip damage Raze can do is going to be a bit more devastating, whereas right now you can kind of regroup and heal it off. And yes, she doesn't have any way to control the map, but I do think it's pretty required that you have some player play entry, and she can play positions different than Phoenix can, and more so is going to be effective at punishing tight corners, whereas Phoenix wants to pop out quickly out of a corner. Moving down to the C and D tier now, I have Viper all the way down here, and I can be convinced that with enough map knowledge, you might be able to get more value out of Viper, but I just have a few problems with her kit. The other controllers are far more flexible. Being able to use your smokes wherever you want, multiple times through the rounds like Omen, or having 3 in your pocket like Brimstone, can either achieve exactly what Viper wants to do mid-round normally, or more. At least to this point, I don't see a reason for the special style of smokes Viper has, and when you take that away, well, the other agents seem to have more tools in their tool belt for that same job. Not to mention, I think her ult isn't very good. The problem is, if you use it early round, well, you might just create a bunch of chaos for the enemy to sneak past Viper and flank you. That's not good. When you use it late round, I don't think it reliably has the devastating effect that it was intended for, where you don't feel that safe inside it. Sure, your enemies get highlighted, but outplaying that just means you have to run in faster, but it's not like she can see you from far when she uses it anyway, and it might just be the peeker's advantage thing or something, but I don't see it working as often as you'd imagine it might. She could Raze with serious mastery and a perfect map for her to come out maybe, but at the moment, I think she's just the budget version of the other controllers. Last on the list is Jett, of course. How couldn't we put Jett at last? The truth is, a lot of what Jett wants to do can be done far more reliably with either Raze or Phoenix, especially the vertical play, where yes, Jett can get a dash and a jump to move diagonally, but remember, Raze can do that with a satchel charge, and the satchel also can do damage, and it's on one of her buttons. Whereas to emulate that same movement, Jett has to use just about everything she's got. I think it's been toned down because if it wasn't, there's a chance that the entire meta of the game flips the other direction, where it's all about mobility and straight up mechanical outplay, and sort of the slow strategy of the game goes to the wayside, but that certainly is an alternate reality right now. Sure, she has 3 smokes, but they last so short that it's hard to really get any use out of them. You have to sort of just spam them down and rush in and hope for the best. She does look dominant whether she's using the op or when she has her ultimate, but that's just not a reliable way to play, and it's not like the op was dominating the game anyway with just the way the game plays overall. Another problem I find with her ultimate is that, yes, if you aim perfectly, you can outgun a rifle. The only problem is, a rifle can outgun you. You are at an advantage using the knives, but it's not like Raze where you can guarantee shooting a spot and blasting someone around a corner safely, or like Phoenix where you use your gun normally and run in and get an extra life. Jett, on the other hand, is far more high risk, high reward, and that makes for good Reddit clips, but not very strong on our tier list today. Well, guys, that's everything for today's agent tier list. What do you guys think? Was patch 0.50 as impactful as you hoped, or should we see more tuning in order to shake up the meta? Because today's tier list isn't far off what we could have said about the agents a couple weeks ago. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos go live. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for Clickheads. We'll see you guys next time.